I will explain who this guy is later and why he's here in just a little minute. Good morning. My name is Lisa White. I'm the Health Promotion Manager. Good morning, 14 Wing. How are you doing today? Are you up and at 'em? Did you have a great celebration yesterday for Canada Day? What a great parade yesterday. Beautiful weather. And here we are. Thursday morning coffee brief. I actually thought today was a holiday. Yesterday to me felt like Sunday, and today's Monday, like Monday the holiday. So I was a little confused when I first woke up. But I still knew that I was going to be coming here talking to you guys today. I'm in a different location. I've had to move around a little bit. We're in the middle of renovations in our house. Like, we're actually renovating everything. The roof, the windows, the bathrooms, painting, everything. And Kenny's was banging around in there earlier, so if I was a couple minutes late, I was trying to scoot him out of there so I could have some quiet time with you guys this morning. Alright, let's get to it. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is conflict management styles and how do you respond when it comes to being in conflict. So what type of communication style might you use, or conflict management style might you use? This information that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is the property of National Defence, and it's a partnership between DFMS and Strengthening the Forces. So our MFRCs are a partnership with us in this information. And this is actually from our intercom course. And some good news about courses. We've got 3 schedules done. We'll be sending them around probably next week. Our classroom for now should be starting up. September 3rd will be our first half-day workshop in the classroom at the gym. And it'll be 6 to 8 people will be able to attend the workshops and the courses. So we're pretty excited to be able to get back in the classroom and see you face to face. So we'll be sending them out next week, and we'll have a virtual schedule via Zoom. So Jeanette will be doing briefings by Zoom. And I will be in the classroom in the fall, depending on how things go, right? We really don't know day to day how things are going to turn out, so for now, that's sort of what we're doing. We also have our Respecting the Calf courses starting up too, so I'll be sending those around next week, and we'll try to see if we can get them on our Facebook page too as well. So that's exciting. Okay, so let's get to today's topic. In some of the other videos, if you've been watching some of them, I did a video, I can't remember when it was, we talked a little bit about conflict, probably the 2nd or 3rd video that I did, and we talked about sort of what is conflict. We talked about the causes of conflict, and then we went into sort of a interest-based collaborative communication model where we talked about how we would have a conversation with somebody we might be in conflict with, or if we just want to have a conversation on a subject to come up with general interests that we both have to make a decision. So we talked about that. And when we think about conflict, and if you're in conflict, it depends on sort of how you respond, because conflict isn't good or bad. It can be either one. It's really how you handle conflict, because sometimes conflict can be, it leads towards creative vision and change. So just because you don't agree with somebody or you're in conflict, it doesn't necessarily always mean that it can be bad. It can be very destructive if it's not handled properly, but it can also lead to problem solving amongst 2 people or amongst a group, which is a good thing, right? And one of the other things to keep in mind too when we're looking at how we respond to conflict, it's also can be a catalyst of escalation, right? So if we are escalating in a situation, and there is a situation, and we feel like we are escalating, it's a matter of recognizing the fact that we are escalating and doing something about it so that we can de-escalate. Because we want to make sure that we are responding to a situation and not reacting to a situation. Because when we react to a situation, sometimes we're unprepared for the situation, and if we're not prepared, we can react negatively, we can react defensively and emotionally. If we're prepared and if we train ourselves to respond to situations, some of the times we're more aware of escalation, that we know that we could be potentially escalating in that situation, and have a plan put in place just in case that happens, right? Taking a time out. I think we talked about some strategies last time. We talked about timeouts, we talked about planned escape, we talked about avoidance, we talked about a few things in the last video. So I'm not going to go into all of those strategies this time because we're really going to talk about how you respond to conflict and what your go-to conflict management style might be. There is sort of a questionnaire that we give out in our intercom course where people can fill it out and answer questions, and it sometimes gives you an understanding of how you typically respond in different situations. And there are some pros and there's some cons to how you would respond within the different conflict management styles. So it's important to understand that there are different conflict management styles, and each style has a different potential impact on the path that a conflict will take. So if handled well, conflict is an opportunity to increase communication and improve relationships. But if it's not handled well, it can be very destructive. So to understand the different styles is important, and it'll likely impact each style that has an outcome in a situation. So we're better equipped to make effective choices if we figure out which conflict management style that we tend to turn to and which one that we should be using in certain situations. So let's take a look at them. And the conflict management styles that I'm going to talk to you about are usually, what we would be typically using them in would be where in situations that I want to meet my goals and I want to see my values, my beliefs, my goals, and my objectives reached. Okay, then that would be more of an assertive approach to conflict. And then if I was being more cooperative, in those situations, the goals of our relationship is what I'm tending to turn to. So I'm really extending my goals and concerns towards satisfying the group or each other. So it's more of a cooperative approach. And so the criteria for that can be used to identify 5 different styles of dealing with conflict. Okay, let's take a look at them now. I gotta scroll down here. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about 5. I'm going to talk about the strategies that you would use in this style. Then I'm going to talk about how it can be effective, and then I'm going to talk about the possible cost to overusing a certain style. And some of this may sound familiar to you, and maybe you've used these. I think that LCC has a course too. I've seen them talk about these styles in their course as well. So let me get to the first page I want to talk to you about. Is it taking me long enough? Holy cow! Where's my page? You gotta have this kind of stuff happen, right? It wouldn't be a live Facebook page if we didn't have this kind of shenanigans going on, eh? Oh, I found the tornado. That's not what I want to talk about. Oh, here it is. I can't even turn it around because if I do, it's going to be all backwards for you guys. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk to you about is called the avoiding style. When we look at assertiveness and we look at the relationship and we look at our goals, okay, it's low on assertiveness and low value on the relationship. So it's no way, let's not make a big deal out of this, and power comes from silence and lack of cooperation. So when we're looking at the turtle, well, the turtle's an avoiding style. What the turtle tends to do is leave the situation physically and mentally. And they like to change the subject because they don't want to talk about what's in front of them because they like to avoid certain situations that make them uncomfortable. So some of the things that they do is they try to change the subject on you, or they just avoid the topic altogether and leave the conversation. They tend to sometimes deny that there's actually a problem, and because they're really not comfortable facing that problem. And they usually try to deflect blame to other people. So avoiding the situations, avoiding confrontation, avoiding talking about the subject or about what the conflict is usually typical of the turtle or somebody who is avoiding a situation. It can be effective sometimes in certain situations. It can be effective when something isn't important to you. So there's a lot of times when I'm in conversations and I may not agree with what the other person's saying or what the other person might be doing in a certain situation, but you know what, it's not important to me, so I'm not going to bother talking about it with that person, or I'm not going to get myself involved in that conflict or that conversation because it really doesn't matter to me. Also, if the damage to the relationship is high. So if you find, and remember, we're relating this to escalation too as well. If you're starting to escalate in a situation, sometimes avoiding the situation is better to protect the damage or protect the relationship, right? Because you don't want to make things worse. So that can be a good thing sometimes. There's also sometimes if there isn't enough time and it's not an emergency, or if you don't really have to make a decision right away. So it's two ways. If it's an emergency, you might avoid it, and if you have lots of time to make a decision, you may avoid it as well. So you can kind of look at both sides of that, right? And if something is an emergency and I haven't had a chance to think about it, I'm not going to bother getting into that responding within the avoiding piece. And if there's a risk of physical harm, so if you think in the conflict that you're in could potentially cause harm to you, mentally or physically, you may want to avoid that situation or avoid talking about that subject. And you need time to think about it, right? So I'm not going to make a decision, I'm not going to comment, I'm not going to talk about the subject or the conflict because I need some time to think about things, and once I get myself sorted out, then I may be able to come into the conversation as well. And that's really good, because if it's really important to you, or if you feel that your emotions could get heightened in that conversation, you want to pre-plan to go into a conversation with somebody so that you need that time to prep yourself. You need time to write down possible assumptions of what the other person might be thinking or saying, and you also want to write down what you're thinking and saying and have it prepared in advance, because you want to protect the relationship when you're having a conversation. And if you haven't prepared for that conversation, this is when people tend to react, and we don't want to react in a situation because we want to protect the relationship. Possible costs to avoiding situation, because there is a cost to that. If you're constantly avoiding a situation and not facing the conflict, then things tend to build up for people, and that's when sometimes people tend to have a blowout. So cost to overusing it, you're not dealing with the situations, you're not dealing with the issue. Disputes can grow and explode, like I'd already mentioned, and the issue doesn't go away, but escalates and spreads to involve other people. So it trickles out, right? Also, too, as things escalate, okay, and you haven't solved a certain issue because you've been avoiding it, when you do sometimes have an explosion, guess what happens? You're bringing in other possible issues that you have avoided as well, and then it becomes a bigger explosion than you expected. Also, sometimes people tend to bring in past hurts so that they can win in a conversation. So they're bringing in things from the past into their conversation because it is an explosion, right? So over-avoiding certain situations can have an impact, a negative impact. But like I mentioned, there's some positive strategies to avoiding certain situations. Got your coffee? So that's one. The next one, so we've got the turtle, which is the avoiding strategy. The next one I'll talk to you about is the competing style, or the shark, they call it. So high on assertiveness, little value placed on the relationship. So here is where we are trying to be getting most of our goals met. We are very competitive in the conversation, and we are trying to get our needs met, and our goal is not to have the person we're talking to's needs met first. We want to have our needs met first. So therefore, there's little value placed on the relationship and more of a value placed on my goals. It's my way or the highway is usually some of the slogans that wrap around the competitive style. And the power comes from the position of strength. So the person who is competitive is holding all the power and is very strong in their opinion and in their values and in their goals being met when it comes to that style. So here are some strategies that the sharks tend to use sometimes. Power of authority, okay, have an authoritarian approach. Position, also majority, so I'm the majority and I have the power and it's my position that I'm trying to uphold, and it's my goals and my ideas that I want to have put forward. The emphasis is on what I want, not necessarily what the relationship needs or what the other person needs or the other party needs. Usually use pressure tactics as a strategy for the shark or the competitive approach. Use persuasion, use force, and sometimes intimidation. They sometimes like to disguise the issue because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get their points across, and they are not or not giving you the time to give your points either across. So they can sometimes disguise the issue in there. It can be effective when the situation requires a quick action. Okay, so sometimes that's a good thing. The shark takes over, the competitive approach takes over, and it's my way or the highway because we need to make a decision and it needs to be made now and it needs to be made quick. And it could be a matter of an emergency and somebody has to make a decision and it needs to be made now. So sometimes that authoritarian, that power, that positional approach can be effective. And this tends to happen in chains of command or within your own management or your own staff, in that you are responsible for a decision that is not popular. So sometimes you have to take that competitive approach and make a decision that you know in advance isn't going to be a popular decision, but it has to be made. And that could happen within the family, right? You may have to take a competitive approach in the family because it's the safest decision to make, even if not all family members are happy with the decision you're going to be making. Sometimes a competitive approach is good for someone if you're dealing with someone who might take advantage of you otherwise. Let's say you're somebody who's very cooperative, you're usually accommodating, you get along with people quite well, and other people know this, and sometimes trying to steamroll over you. And if that's the case, then you want to make sure that sometimes you put on that authoritarian competitive approach when you're making decisions, right? So people don't necessarily roll over onto you, right? So people I work with, they know I'm pretty relaxed, I'm pretty laid back, I'm pretty accommodating. I'll talk about which style I usually am, but there are times when we call it putting our face on. So there's times when you have to put your face on and you have to make a decision even if the people you're working with are not happy with it. And I call it, I have to put my face on, especially if it's something that I'm working on and something that I strongly believe in. I'm usually very cooperative, I'm usually very accommodating, but there are times when I have to put on my competitive approach, my competitive hat, to stand up for what I believe in. Possible cost of overuse. It can increase stress and may lead to health problems. If you're always using that competitive approach all the time, people see that you're not flexible or you're unreasonable, and that's a high standard to hold on to all the time. And over time that can cause relationship problems, it can cause health problems. People don't tend to respect you as much because they can see that you are not flexible, you aren't cooperative, you're not accommodating, you're not able to compromise or not able to collaborate. So people don't want to work with you sometimes, and they don't respect you, and they sometimes don't want to be around you. And it can cause health problems, it can cause relationship breakdown, it can cause professional problems at your workplace and performance issues, especially if you're not open. I mean, I think people become better parents, better people, better workers, better managers when they're open-minded and they're able to listen to what other people are saying, listen to the different ideas, right, and not be closed-minded to that. So you're better off to be able to be open-minded. And when you're very closed-minded and you're very particular on what you want and you're very structured on your needs and your goals, you're not open to change, right, as much, and that can have an impact on your own personal performance, right? It can decrease communication, trust, and morale for people. If you're very authoritarian all the time, it can decrease morale in your workplace and in your home, right? If you're not open to suggestions, if your family members can't come to you and give forth their ideas, and you can't have a conversation around some of the things you like to do within the household, then people don't trust you, don't want to be around you, don't communicate as well with you, and the morale of the family can go down. And it can cause stress for the other person that's listening to you or talking with you or in conflict with you, because it causes a fight or flight response for some of those people that are in front of you, right? Ever been in front of somebody that's very authoritarian all the time? It can be stressful, and the stress response can be ignited for that person that's listening to the other person, and it can cause some health and stress problems for the other person. So it could be family members that end up stressed and strained, or it can be your coworkers that you're working with, right? So we went from avoiding up here, right, to the shark. Like, these guys are two different type of, well, shark or the competitive approach. They're completely two different approaches. We're going from one to the other, right, which is high and low. So let's kind of get in the middle, okay? This is me. This is the middle ground that I usually tend to be this person sometimes. And we call this person the teddy bear. And this is an accommodating style of an approach, right? So low on assertiveness and high value put on the relationship. And I sometimes run into problems with this approach because I do place a high value on my relationships. And when I do that, and I'm not putting as much value on my own needs or my own goals and wants, then that can be a problem, right? So this is a good style to have, but there's, like any other style, there's some pros and cons. And I usually have to work on putting my goals and my objectives and my values first sometimes. And I think that I'm getting better at it, but I still have to keep working with that. So here, it's okay, whatever you say, we'll do it your way. Which can be hard if you're doing that all the time. The power comes from the relationship and approval of others. So I'm a type of person who I put the needs of other people usually before my own a lot of the times. And I'm not saying that to be, ooh, look at me. It's just a thing that something I've done since I was a little girl. I used to, when you were younger and you'd have only one cookie and you would cut it in half. Would you give the other person the bigger half, or would you take the bigger half? I'm the bigger, give the bigger, give, right? Which is fine, but you also have to maintain that. You have to look at your own needs too, and your own values and all that as well, making sure that sometimes you get the bigger half of the cookie and somebody doesn't get the bigger half of the cookie, right? So in this style, play down the conflict to keep surface harmony. Okay, we don't want to, let's slow down here. There's some of the strategies to kind of play things down a little bit because you want to have harmony within the household or within your workplace. Yield to the other person's point of view. Build social credit for the future. Choice to set aside your needs to satisfy other interests. So that's typically some of the strategies of the teddy bear. It can be effective. Okay, here's the piece that's good about it. Although you're right, you want to show that you are reasonable. Okay? And I tend to do that a lot within my relationships at home, right? And sometimes at work, right? I might be right, but I am reasonable. I can be open to, okay, I know that I'm right here, but I'll listen to what you have to say anyway. Right, and see what if something else comes out of that, right? You want to build good faith and relationships for the future. So it's important that you maintain your relationships at work and at home. And you want to have good relationships with people. You want to show people that you're accommodating. You want to show people that you can be flexible and that you can cooperate. The other person might learn from the experience and the risk is low. Okay, so I've done this with a few co-workers before. I'm going to use you, Jeanette. I have to use, I don't know if you're there or not, but I'm going to use you as an example. when Jeanette first started working for me, she was doing her first presentation ever. And she decided that she was going to do it. She went on vacation for 2 weeks, and then she decided that she was going to do it on Monday morning at 8 o'clock, right after vacation. Right? And I knew that was a bad idea to do that, because first of all, you don't have time to prepare. She was working in a different building, so you want to make sure that the equipment is there and all your materials are there and you've got everything and all of this and that. But, and you want to have that time, and she was coming in right on a Monday morning at 8 o'clock. But it was her first briefing. She was doing it with the fitness staff, so there was only, and the physio, so there was maybe like 5 or 6 people there, and it was short. And so I didn't think it was a good idea for her to do it on the Monday morning right afterwards, but I let her do it anyway, because I knew that if something went funny, the risk was low. It was people she works with. She's not at the ZX Theater with 150 military members in there at 8 o'clock in the morning right after vacation. She's with staff members. She's close to the gym, and so on. So there was some running around, and there were some things that she forgot and stuff like that. It was minor little things, but the risk was low, and I knew that I had to let her do that to learn from her experience. So we tend to sometimes do that as parents too as well. You know that your child shouldn't be climbing up on that rock. The rock isn't very high. It's a small rock. They're probably going to fall off of it, but if they fall off of it, they're really not going to hurt themselves all that much. They might scrape their knee. You let them do it so they learn not to do that afterwards, right? So that's a good strategy for people who are accommodating, because they're allowing people to learn from their experiences. And that's sometimes very hard to do, because we tend to want to protect people a lot, right? We tend to want to be a very authoritarian person at the time, because we don't want someone to get hurt, right? Or make the wrong decision. So accommodating, that can be a good thing for someone who's accommodating. Possible cost to overuse. Lack of healthy confrontation. And so this is where some people tend to have to work on being more assertive. And that's, again, a learned trait, right? Is being able to do that. If we're passive or aggressive, okay, if we're a turtle, passive, or aggressive, a shark, or a competitive approach, those are automatic responses, and an assertive approach is a learned approach. So people have to learn that skill, right? And underuse of your talents. Like you may have talents and ideas, and you are adhering to the ideas of other people more often to accommodate other people. Your good ideas and your experiences are not being put forward, right? And people can miss out on that. Begin to feel taken advantage of, and so that's where, when people tend to feel like they're taken advantage of, that's when the competitive approach sometimes can be an approach that someone might use to protect that, right? I call that sort of putting on my face, when I have to be more competitive, or I have to make a decision, or I have to be the one that's goals need to be met in a certain situation, right? May frustrate others who want to collaborate. So people who want to collaborate ideas, okay, back and collaborate, they want to hear your side of the story, or your ideas and your interests, and you're just accommodating to their interests, and they get frustrated, especially if they want to collaborate, right? So that's another one of the skills that I feel that, or my responses are, is I'm a collaborator and I'm an accommodator. But I think all of us have a little bit of everything in there. Sometimes we'll accommodate, sometimes we'll be competitive, and sometimes we'll avoid situations. It just all depends on the situation that you're in. I'm probably more competitive at home than I am at work. Well, maybe not as much now because my kids are gone, but when you're raising, I raised 2 boys and I have 3 stepdaughters, so there's times when I found that I was more of a shark, or had to be, or was, and had to learn to be more accommodating, learn to avoid certain things, right? So you may be certain styles at work and then certain styles at home. It just all depends on the situation and the heightened stress and all the stuff that's going on too, right? Okay, let's go on to the next one. So the next one is called the fox. And this is splitting the difference. So the fox is a compromising style. So compromising, splitting the difference. And when you're compromising, you're kind of in the middle here. You're putting moderate assertiveness towards your goals and moderate value on the relationship. So you're half and half. So where we had avoiding was putting low assertiveness and avoiding is low on assertiveness and low value on the relationship. And then you have the shark, which is high value on my goals and low value on the relationship. So right there in the middle is the compromising person, which is putting half and half. So moderate to your goals and some value towards the relationship. They're kind of right in the middle. So they're meeting someone halfway. And the power comes from moderation and reasonableness in this style. Some of the strategies here are allowing a little bit for everybody. So it's everybody gets a few bones and we're all getting a little bit of something, but we're not all getting it, right? Or not giving it all to somebody else. If you're getting it, everybody's getting a little bit. You're able to introduce multiple issues and meet halfway on them. And again, you're splitting the difference. So it can be effective if you have a time crunch and it requires quick solutions. And sometimes, I'm going to get into collaborating, but as I mentioned in my last video, if you're collaborating, that can take a lot of time and it can be very tiring. So what tends to happen is people tend to compromise at the end. They have to meet halfway. Some agreement is needed, even temporarily, for a complicated situation. So it's very complicated. Let's just agree that for temporarily right now, we're going to meet halfway. Maybe later on you might readdress the situation and have more time to collaborate, but right now we're going to have to compromise on this situation because we got to move on to other stuff. We don't have time to collaborate, right? And because I want to protect the relationship, I'm not going to be the shark, or I'm not going to be competitive in this situation, and I'm not going to avoid it either. Okay, so let's just compromise, and maybe we can maybe live with that, or maybe we have to readdress something later, right? Let's see. Okay, so compromising is great. Like, it's good, it's fast, we get a little bit, everybody gets a little bit of something, but the problem with that is we're not feeling like we win sometimes. We're not feeling like we're getting all our needs met and all our goals met, so that can be a possible cost of overuse. They feel a loss. We're always sensing a loss in here, always going to give something up. When am I going to be able to be the one that gets my goals and objectives met, right? So they kind of tend to feel a bit of a loss over time. Sometimes doesn't deal with the underlying issue if we're compromising a lot. I've done that before where I'll compromise and I'll compromise and I'll compromise. And then there's these underlying issues and underlying things that I'm just not getting met. And over time that can lead to a possible explosion in the relationship if you're still compromising all the time and having to do that, right? You're not getting your own needs met. And people tend to inflate their opening positions to get more. I think this was one of the first things, I hope chain of command in that, there's not very many people watching. So I can remember when I first started being a manager, and one of the things we had to, I was taught to inflate, not that I'm doing it now, but that I was taught to inflate was our budget, right? You'll over ask for money, so that you get what you kind of really need, because they never give you everything you ask for, right? Sometimes they do, a lot of the times they do, but if back in my day when I first started, we never really kind of got what we asked for, we kind of got something less than that. So if you overinflate what you want, you might get what you need, and that can be a possible, some people might think that's a good strategy, but over time, it can be a poor strategy. It's not a very good way to communicate, right? To overinflate your needs. People tend to pick up on that over time. And the last one, which is the collaborating style. So this one is high on assertiveness and high on the relationship. So that's where Everybody is going to win here. We are going to collaborate as long as it takes so that everybody feels that they've won in the situation. So some of the strategies for a collaborator, the power comes from openness, clarity, and cooperation, and creativity. And some of the strategies that a compromising style would be is listening to the other parties that are putting forth their ideas, communicating openly to understand the other's needs and values. And this is when I did that interest-based collaboration communication model in one of my last videos. Is that approach is where we have to explore the interests of both parties, and we take the time to do that. I want to completely understand what the other person is telling me, and I want to know what their position is, and then I want them to hear mine, and then we're going to come up with a solution that we're both happy with. We're not going to have to give anything up. We're not going to have to compromise here. We're going to come up to a solution where we both win in the end. Okay? Problem with that strategy sometimes is that it can take a lot of time for people. If you're in a group and you're collaborating in a group, sometimes one person at the end tends to not, there could be someone that's completely not collaborating. Sometimes in groups, one person ends up having to compromise some of their thoughts and objectives, right? Another good strategy for a compromiser is they do learn from people's insights. So that's one of the things that I like to do. I love to collaborate with other people. And I feel like as a facilitator, you really do have to have a collaborative approach in your mind, especially when you're teaching a whole bunch of different courses in adult learning, and adults are putting forth their ideas and their opinions on the subject that you're teaching. If you can sit back and listen to that and absorb some of that, you would be surprised how much you can learn from other people. How much you can learn if you're a parent and you sit back and you listen to the ideas and the thoughts of what your kids have to say. Even if you ask them, if you soundboard solutions to them and you say, well, what do you think you should do in this situation? And they come up with their own ideas sometimes without you having to tell them all the time. So that's the beauty of collaborating, I find, is people are able to feel safe and comfortable in a situation to be able to bring forth their opinions and their ideas on certain situations, right? Using pooled information and resources effectively. So this is great. Like if everybody brings something to the table, everybody brings in some stuff, we got lots of resources, lots of ideas, this is going to lead towards us being more creative. I mean, we just had a fantastic parade that was just put on by Community Rec and MFRC put on this great big parade. And by collaborating together as a team, as you saw yesterday, how well it went, right? So that's just one of the examples of collaborating ideas and everybody bringing resources and stuff to the table. And collaborating as a family. So remember, this is from Intercom. So if you are bringing your kids and your husband and your wife or your partners or whatever to the table, and you're trying to solve a situation, and everybody gets to put in their ideas and their thoughts, and you come up with an approach, or you come up with suggestions, or you come up with rules for the household that everybody's had a chance to put forth their ideas, then there's more buy-in from everybody in the family. Same as if you're collaborating at work with a group of people, there's more buy-in if everybody has a chance to be able to put in their ideas and their information together, and you collectively come up with something that you're all happy with, right? People buy into it, and it can reduce stress in the house, and it can reduce stress at work too. People start to build trust within their relationships. People get encouraged. People feel motivated to have conversations within the family or within their workplace because they feel that they're being included. They feel like they're being heard. And that's important. We want to feel valued, and we want to feel understood, right? So even if I don't agree with what you're saying to me, I still want to have that opportunity to be able to be heard, and I want you to understand what I'm saying to you, right? And then we can have a conversation, because sometimes when you just understand and you slow down and you listen to what the other person is saying, sometimes what they're saying you actually are agreeing with, but it was the way you were having that conversation, right? So collaborators are really good at slowing down conversations, are really good at being patient to listen to the other person's perspective. And that's a good quality to have. It's also effective if you have ongoing problem solving that you need to do. Collaborating can be an effective strategy there for solving problems, because when you're solving problems, you really don't always want to be competitive in your approach, because you can be at certain times. Again, we talked about some of the good things about being a competitive responder to conflict, because you have to make a decision that's quick. You want to prevent people from taking advantage of you, and you want to get your goals met for once, right? So there is time for that. But again, if we're overusing that competitive approach, then we're losing trust with people. People don't want to be around you. It can damage the relationship and so on. It causes stress for a lot of people. But if you are, and problems tend to not get solved in a healthy way sometimes if we're too rough in our approach. But if we are collaborating, it does lead to healthy problem solving. Satisfaction with the work and the commitment to the solutions are important to the participants. So it's important to everybody that they're able to have their ideas brought forward, and those ideas being part of the solution as well, right? My eyes are really wide and I don't know why. Maybe it's I'm having too much coffee. I don't know. Okay, so there's some problems to over collaborating, and one of the things is fatigue. It can be tiring to completely collaborate all the time, and it can lead to fatigue for some people. Sometimes people put too much emphasis on the collaborating of solutions that they're forgetting about all these other things that they have to solve, or other things that they have to take a look at, right? So if they're collaborating, it takes up a lot of time, takes off a lot of energy. It can cause people to get tired, and it can cause people to not address all the other things that they need to do, and then they end up falling behind, whether it's at home or whether it's at work. It could lead to a paralysis, meaning that there's no solutions to be developed here that's going to make everybody happy. And usually what tends to happen is either they either have to compromise, or somebody ends up accommodating the other person, or avoiding the situation altogether, or being very competitive in their approach. So if we come into a paralysis, then people tend to turn to the other conflict management styles, right? Depending on what your default browser is. So my default browser is accommodating. However, I try to be collaborative. I do avoid at certain times, and I have been competitive. So if you're having a mixture of all of them, but when stress is high and when there's a paralysis, people tend to turn to their default browser. So I usually am the one that goes, oh, whatever you guys want to do is fine with me, even though it may not be fine with me. Right? If we're trying to decide in the family where we want to go for a Sunday, like every Sunday when we had our kids, we used to go somewhere every Sunday, all the kids in the van, and we're going. Like, there's no discussion. We're going. It's family time, whether you want to have family time or not. We're going. But then we're trying to decide where we want to go, and it's taking so much time. We're just like, you know what? We've wasted like how much time, and we could have been on the road by now. So sometimes someone would have to take a competitive approach, say, you know what, we're going here. Or I would just say, you know what, we'll just go where you guys want to go today, and we'll go where I want to go another time, right? So that tends to happen when there's a paralysis, where I can't come up to a solution that's good for all of us, or a place that we want to go that makes everybody happy, right? So let's summarize this a little bit. Okay, so I talked about 5 conflict communication styles that people tend to use when in conflict. The first one I talked about was the avoiding style. This is where people put low on assertiveness and low value on the relationship. So people tend to avoid the situations that they're in. The second one I talked about was the competitive style, and this style is where we put high on assertiveness, so high on reaching my goals. So I'm high on assertiveness and putting little value on the relationship. So it's my way or the highway, sort of a competitive approach. Then there was the teddy bear approach, which is somebody who is more accommodating, so low on assertiveness and putting high value on the relationship. The fourth one was the compromising. So this one here is where we each get a little bit. So it's a middle ground, right? Half and half, halfway. half on relationship, half on assertiveness, right? Or my own goals being met. And then the collaborative style, which is everybody wins in this style. There's high value on the relationship and high value on the goals of the participants getting met, right? So which one do you think you are? If you get a chance to come to our intercom course, it will be in November. It's a 1.5-day course. You'll get a chance to fill out because there's a little questionnaire, a conflict management style tally sheet that we give people to fill in. And it comes out and it tells you what communication style do you tend to use when things are calm, and what communication style do you tend to use when things are rough, like in a stormy situation. And I'll give you the name of the person that does it, because you might be able to find it online, I'm not sure. But it's Ron Craybill. Ron Craybill puts out the material on that, so if you get a chance to find it online, I don't know if you can, and fill it in, you might determine what communication style you tend to turn to. I think they change over the years too. They change when you have kids, they change if your work changes, like if mine changed a little bit when I went from a fitness instructor to a manager, and when I was a teacher it was different up in Ontario when I was teaching, and I had kids teaching in the classroom, or when your kids are little, or then your kids are teenagers, and so on. So your styles will change as you grow in your workplace and as you grow in your family, right? I'm in a place now where all my kids are gone and I'm very comfortable in my workspace, so I'm getting an understanding of sort of what my styles look like now, and I shared with you that I'm probably an accommodator and a collaborator, but I do tend to avoid some situations. I tend to sometimes put on a competitive hat, and it's very easy to compromise, I find sometimes too. So what are you? So thank you for tuning in for today. I can't believe it was 48 minutes. Maybe you guys are like, is she finishing, right? But hope you got some information out of that today. If you have questions or you want more information, feel free to email me at 14winghpmanager@gmail.com. And yeah, coming up on Monday is me again. So I'll be doing the Monday morning short, and I will be talking about thinking skills or thinking errors. So when it comes to managing angry moments and anger management, I don't know if you guys remember me talking about the thinking skills model, where our thoughts lead to our physical sensations, which lead to our emotions, which lead to our behavior. Well, when it comes to our thoughts, we tend to have thinking errors in there that can lead to behavior that may not be a good type of behavior, right? So I'm going to talk about those thinking errors on Monday and let you see what they all look like. And then up on Thursday, Jeanette will be talking to you at 10 o'clock next Thursday. She will be talking to you about smoking cessation. So she's going to talk to you about the Butt Out program, and she's going to share with you some tips on maybe how to get started, what to do if you want to quit smoking, and sort of what the procedures are on the base. So if you're a military member, what do you do if you want to quit smoking? And if you are a civilian member, what can you do if you want to quit smoking? Where would you go? What are the resources and stuff like that? And whatever else she's going to talk to you. She knows what she's going to talk to you about. But if you want to tune in, I think it's great. If you want to quit smoking, tune in next Thursday at 10 o'clock. Who's here? Who is here now? Oh, hi Lappy. I see Karen, Jill. How's it going? Are you still there? I don't even know if you guys are still there. Maybe you're frozen on my screen. I don't know. Edith. And Kenny. So I don't know if anybody else is there, but thanks for tuning in. I hope it wasn't too confusing for you. Again, I thought today was a holiday. I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. I don't know what I'm going to talk about in a couple of weeks, but I'll figure it out then. Thanks for tuning in. Have a fantastic day. And tomorrow's Friday, everybody. Woohoo! Have a good one. Talk to you later. Bye.